Welcome back to The Conservative. Hi there, I'm Mike Lannon, your host, and Peg TV is, of course, the producer of this show, or I guess it's the other way. I'm the producer and Peg TV is the host. But anyway, welcome back. It's been a while. We've been out with this COVID-19, and I basically call it the Wuhan China virus. I don't know why they call it COVID-19, because they want to be politically correct, which I believe you can't always be politically correct. So we're coming back here with about 98 days. By the time I get back for another show, it'll be about 86 days before the election. I'm watching as I begin this show today, Attorney Barr on Capitol Hill in front of the U.S. House of Representatives, Jerry Nadler's committee, and it is an absolute zoo. Getting questions from the right that are questions, getting filibuster statements that he cannot answer because they won't let him on the left. And this is what we've come down to in America today, is that you can't have a discourse. You can't have a conversation without it being ruinous to the opposite side, because you are not entitled to have a difference of opinion. So you can't kill an idea, but ideas can kill you for sure. And what if I told you that this has all happened before? You know, these riots, the violence, the church burnings, which we should talk about. We could have a whole show on what's going on in the Christian community in America right now. Attacks on police, destruction of private property, and all in the name of equality. Yes, this has all happened before. What is the deadliest thing mankind has ever encountered in world history? Is it a disease or a pandemic? Is it a famine? Is it nuclear war or a nuclear weapon? Your answers to these questions will not even be close. By sheer body count, the deadliest thing mankind has ever encountered in world history is an idea. The idea and deadliest virus in the world is communism. In 1848, Europe was burning. Political upheaval led to mass violent riots in over 50 countries. Buildings were burned, shops were looted, and national militias were called in to quell the mob. Does this sound familiar? In this year, an obscure socialist named Karl Marx published the Communist Manifesto. The Communist Manifesto outlines how to destroy capitalism and usher in communism through the means of socialism. So you guys can all go out there and read this. I've read it more than once just so that I can be prepared for TV shows and for debates with people that don't read it and for whatever reason believe that socialism is the next best thing since sliced bread with peanut butter, jelly, and plain butter. Now, to accomplish this goal, the manifesto pits two groups against each other based on their identity. Bourgeois versus proletariat. Now, I'm sure you've all heard that before, which is essentially business owners against the workers of that business. Identity hatred is the key component that makes communism work. The history of all existing hitherto is the history of class struggle, Marx wrote. Today, we call this identity politics, and you all can see what that is, and the brand is very much to the right or to the left, the Democrats to the left, the Republicans to the right. No discourse, no ability to come to compromising positions. There is so much dislike, so much disrespect, so much hatred on the left that it is permeating the entire society. Is there any on the right? Of course. There is all kinds of ilk on both sides, and somebody somewhere is going to have to stand up and become much more of a middle American and bring us together. The closest to that, believe it or not, in the last 50 years, other than Ronald Reagan, is Donald Trump. And Trump is vilified simply because he is not a part of the establishment. And I hope you all are reading the reports that are coming out right now on the attempted coup by the FBI, the CIA, and the NIA and the Obama administration during the course of 2015 and 2016 and 2017 to take down the current president of the United States. It is disgusting to see what it is that these folks have been able to do against an American citizen. And Donald Trump is just representative of all of us, representative of what can happen to any American that dares to open his mouth. Don't you think that I don't sit here sometimes and worry about what it will be like for those who look at the show and decide, okay, he has to go, we don't like what he is saying. So the principles of identity politics, they're the same. Define the people by their groups and pit them against each other with a perceived injustice and then violence. And I've often been heard to say, and I will say it right now, because I'm not going to go down the road too much today on Black Lives Matters and all these other things that are out there today. There's only two races of humans. There are decent humans and there are indecent humans. Those are the two races. There's none of this other stuff about color. That's my upbringing. And it should be the upbringing of everybody. Is it, and Martin Luther King said it best, it's what's in a man's heart, not on the color of his skin. It's what he has. So either the person that we're talking to is either a decent individual or they're not. And if they're not a decent individual, then they're probably an indecent individual. And so those who are playing identity politics and causing the thought of race riots and all this other stuff that's going on in our American Democratic-held cities, the blue cities, where they refuse to enforce law, those folks are not decent humans. If you are a follower of Marx, you will embrace violence. He called for the forcible overthrow of existing social conditions and for common ruin of the classes. What we are left with, after the violent class warfare, is a communist state. Marx spelled out plainly what this looks like: complete state ownership of your life, no private property, high taxes, government control of communications and media, very much like what is being proposed today in the upcoming election by the Biden campaign. Go read the Democratic platform, go read Bernie Sanders, go read AOC, go read what the left is proposing in high taxes, ownership by the state of property, unbelievable, including taking a look at the AFCA attempt by Obama's administration and continuing on of the reduction of folks to own their own home. So according to Marx, this includes government jobs for workers, government income for all workers, mandatory government education, and a government that supersedes the church in power. Okay, so is any of that going on as I just read that to you and thought about it in my prepared statements, because I haven't been back here for so long. I've prepared the statements today. Usually I don't use prepared statements. But these are the programs that the left is pushing today, nearly 200 years after the writing of the Communist Manifesto. And they are using identity politics and, yes, violence to do it. Remember, this is about power and control. In 1917, Marx's ideas got their big chance. Vladimir Lenin was a Russian Marxist living in exile in Switzerland during World War I. Lenin believed wholeheartedly in communism, and upheaval during the war was his shot to create a communist state. Shockingly, when Lenin asked the German military for passage to Russia in the midst of a war between the two countries, Germany enthusiastically said yes. The Germans treated Lenin and his communist manifesto, communism itself, as a deadly weapon to be used against their Russian enemy, a virus to infect the opponent and to cripple them. The Germans agreed to transport Lenin across the front lines into Russia, but only via a sealed train. So, Lenin and his virus could not break out in Germany. The Germans unleashed the deadly weapon of communism on the Russian people. It was a horrifically effective tactic. As soon as Lenin arrived in Russia, he employed identity politics and social justice, and a potent tool in his civil war. Lenin told his armed revolutionaries in 1918, "Comrade, hang, and I mean hang, so the people can see not less than 100 known rich men. Do this so that for hundreds of miles around, the people can see, tremble, and cry. They are killing and will go on killing." This is exactly what the left wants to do, and you can see it in our streets in America today. There are peaceful protests in America protesting the violence, the illegal violence of certain police officers, not many of them, less than 1%. Certain police officers using poor judgment and attacking citizens. And I say citizens because all those that are being attacked are not necessarily black. We happen to have George Floyd, who has been lost in this argument now. It's been almost 4 months, I think, since he was choked to death by a police officer that knelt on his neck. Don't even hear about him anymore, not the police officer, but the gentleman, George Floyd. It's all now through the peaceful protesters showing up, as Attorney Barr said, by militant groups of people, all kinds of different factions, mostly from the left. And we'll talk about one group in just a second here because it's tied to the Communist Party. But these folks come to these peaceful protesters with bottles filled with solid ice, with baseball bats on corners, with all kinds of weaponry to disrupt this peaceful protest and cause mayhem and damage. And this is not, I don't care what the left says, this is not for America. We have got to stop this, or it's going to metastasize like a very bad cancer, and we are going to then have a terrible time trying to stop it. Doesn't anybody wonder why gun sales in this country are up? Thank you, God, for the Second Amendment. People are indeed purchasing guns. They know that they're going to have to protect themselves if the government, the peaceful government, the police officers of their community won't do it. So getting back to the Russian history, Lenin won using identity politics to pit groups against each other, incite violence, create anarchy, and then the virus took hold. Private property and businesses were immediately dissolved. Freedom of speech was eliminated. Individual freedoms were crushed. There was an economic collapse, famine, starvation, secret police raids, and millions of Russians were sent to concentration camps, many in the cold of Siberia. More people were sent to concentration camps in communist Russia than were sent to their death camps in Nazi Germany. Go look it up, folks. In spite of the practiced death horrors in Russia, communism spread and always with violent force. Eastern Europe, China, Vietnam, Cambodia, North Korea, Cuba, and parts of Africa fell to communist revolutions and dictators. It is critical to note these mass deaths are not caused by foreign forces, but from within communism itself. Communism kills in the name of equality. They kill their own people. They will, if you read it carefully, even kill those who help them to come to power. They'll take the intellectual elites, those who are, even in America today, especially college professors, doctors and lawyers, people that have intellect, and then wipe them out. They don't want them to then voice a difference of opinion later. Communists do not care. They are indifferent to suffering, man-made famines, mass starvation, and concentration camps. These situations are the norm and the cost of social justice. The death toll numbers under communism are staggering. Eastern Europe, 1 million people. Vietnam, 1 million people. Afghanistan, 1.5 million people. Africa, 1.7 million people. North Korea, 2 million people. Cambodia, 2 million people. And the Soviet Union, 20 million people. But nowhere is this genocidal sociopathic bloodlust of communism more evident than the dark history of communist China. China became a communist state in 1949 after a bloody and prolonged civil war, which was led by Mao Zedong. After becoming a communist dictator, Mao joked about the killing of business owners in his own country, which was 30 million people. We have so many people, we can afford to lose a few, Mao boasted. Mao's attempt to industrialize China, known as the Great Leap Forward, murdered more than 45 million people in a very few short years, many simply from starvation. A total of 65 million Chinese nationals were murdered under Mao's communism. Mao kept power in spite of the genocide. Communists never give up power, ever. They do not have to. The state is God, and you are nothing. Mao's political party remains in power in China to this day, and they exercise an ironclad grip on its people. China's Communist Party failed to respond to the coronavirus, and it's cost many innocent people their lives. The virus outbreak, most likely from the incompetent management of their own viral labs, was made exponentially worse by the communist regime's inability to admit wrongdoing and warn the rest of the world. The United States has paid a huge price and continues to pay a huge price because of this lack of free expression allowed anywhere else in the world that's free. The communist Chinese are still suppressing the information. And yet we hear the American press, and notice when I said the takeover of the media by the communists as a part of the avenue towards socialistic communism. This continues to this day as we continue to see the spin of the coronavirus outbreaks. Very few people will tell you about the slope of the death curve being under 1% nationally, that the slope of the occurrences of a coronavirus is slightly up, but much less than it was in March, and that we happen to have in this country a pretty good grip on how to solve the problem. But you won't hear that in the media. You're going to hear, woe is me, and you hear it every night on the news. So, these communist regime actions directly led to the global spread of the deadly virus, resulting in the deaths of more than 100,000 Americans. But as always with communism, the worst is yet to come. Many of the organized leftists torching American cities are Marxists. They admit it. They say so. And they are practicing the tenets of communism to the absolute letter. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on ideological theories. Patrice Cullors, co-founder of Black Lives Matter, said, "We need to use identity politics to destroy private property in the name of social justice, demonize capitalists, publicly persecute those who disagree with us, incite violence, and seize power and control. That's the top of 1/3 of the 3 women, all Marxists, who started BLM back in the days of the Ferguson case. Their total objective is to destroy America and to start all over again with a socialist communist party. And you heard me say at the front end, we should have these conversations, but I don't know that we have to put them underneath a group's organized effort to destroy the country. We don't have to have BLM to have these conversations. We don't have to have any group to sit down and have a conversation with each other about where we are. Have we come a long, long way? John Lewis certainly said we had, okay? And certainly John Lewis versus Patrice Cullors, who is going to listen to who? Okay? John Lewis, who has just recently died, was and is a famous American civil rights movement expert, did a lot for this country. Would you listen to him? He's a Democrat. Or would you listen to Patrice Cullors and the BLM? I think I'd much rather listen to the speeches over the years of a peaceful protester by the name of John Lewis. That's where I'd be. That's where I'm at. Who's listened to his speeches? Go listen to them. Listen to the speeches that he's made over his lifetime. Excellent speeches. Did I agree with all of his politics? Absolutely not. Could you sit down and have a conversation with John Lewis? My sources tell me, yes, you could. He was respectful. He didn't agree with much of what was said on the right, but he didn't decide that those on the right should be vilified and shot, hung, killed, beaten up. Didn't believe in that. So, you heard what the BLM tri-owner has said. Hawk Newsom, chairman of the Black Lives Matter of Greater New York, stated in the month of late June, early July of 2020, if this country doesn't give us what we want, then we will burn down this system and replace it. There you go. Who's going to listen to him? Well, there are people out there that want to destroy the country, and they are listening to him. So, bringing it all back to 1932, when Stalinist-backed communists in Germany formed a group to violently clash with the police, terrorize the public, and physically assault their political enemies in the streets. The name of that group was Antifascistische Aktion, or Antifa. Today's Antifa uses the same symbol as was displayed in 1932. Their tactics have now moved to our streets, and so have their motivations, although it appears, according to Attorney General Barr, that Antifa is loosely organized and is organized primarily for terrorist activities for an event, and not necessarily organized as a group long-term over long periods of time. They, with our social media, can call for a activity within the movement, a peaceful movement, and burn down a building or tear down a statue, erase culture, erase our culture of statues. And I find it very interesting. I mean, if you want to do tongue-in-cheek, because this program originates in Rutland, Vermont, go look at the Earl of Rutland and realize that he was a non-abolitionist, a slave owner. That would mean that if we're going to change culture, Rutland needs to change its name. So does Clarendon, so does Cavendish, so does Wallingford, so does Shrewsbury. Go look at why we named our cities as we came from England over here, and why we should now change the names. I mean, if you really want to get down to it and look at the stupidity of the actions of some of the folks that are out there protesting who have no knowledge of what the history of the country is. Have we been a perfect nation? Gee, no. Let's see. Got kicked out of the Garden of Eden because we were imperfect people. We chose sin. So therefore, we are in 2020 the same problem. We think we know what we don't know. We continue to voice opinions that are inaccurate because we don't intellectualize, we don't learn, we don't physically do anything that we're supposed to do. We certainly don't do the spiritual things. Their Antifa tactics have now moved to our streets, and so have their motivations. Vladimir Lenin and Karl Marx both agreed that the goal of socialism is communism, power and control. It is always about power and control. What is happening in America right now is not new. In fact, it is centuries old. The tactics are meant to bewilder Americans and make us question our institutions. They are meant to divide us and raise what we know as America to the ground. It is a revolution of the deadliest virus known to man, communism. We cannot kill an idea, but ideas can kill us. If we wish to survive, we must fight this virus. So, in conclusion, you've got an election coming up, and this election has more consequences for the American public than any election in my lifetime. Now, I'm approaching 76. Am I afraid of the outcomes associated with coronavirus, Wuhan Chinese virus? No, not really. Don't worry about it too much. Okay? Practice social distancing, wash my hands often, wear a mask. Got it right here in my pocket when I'm out, wore it coming into this studio today. And plan to continue to do it until there's a vaccine or until this virus doesn't really affect people the way that it did in March. Okay, not too worried about that. So at 76, what do you worry about? I worry about the failure of the greatest country this world has ever known to exist. Greater than the Sumerian Empire. Greater than any empire that we know was in existence but can't read what they did prior to the Sumerians. Greater than Babylon, greater than Rome, greater than Greece, greater than the British Empire. This is a country founded on Judeo-Christian principles. It is under God. And I don't mean God in a small little word as the communists would like you to believe in the state as your only God. This is God, the creator of the heavens and the earth. This is the God that, according to our founding fathers, who prayed often on the outcome of what the Constitution and government by men might look like. Based those principles on Judeo-Christian principles, based them on biblical principles, and has survived now for nearly 240 years. We should be worried. That is my big concern. Not Wuhan virus, the virus of communism. Will it destroy us? Will we be so educationally arrogant, so individually uneducated, so physically listening to the left about only they can provide us with all of the government needs of mankind and destroy the spiritual well-being of this country with moral relativism. And you all know that I've talked about moral relativism before, but that is, you get to decide what is right and what's wrong. You don't have to look to God-given rules, regulations, policies, and procedures, better known as the Ten Commandments, to Judeo-Christian principles. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Now, that's got to go. Do unto others as the government tells you you will do. And this is why we have such a topsy-turvy country today, is that people are following head over heels for this moral relativism, and they're doing it in our schools. They're allowing this to happen. Everything goes. No one's ever got a consequence. No one has to ever live by a consequence. Everybody gets a prize. All of those issues that you've heard me talk to before. Well, I'm glad I'm back. The half hour's gone. I'll be back again. We'll talk about some other issues. Think about what I've said. Bye now.